Travels Through History is brought to you by Maple Leaf Foods. 1907. She was born Magdalena Carmen Frieda Kahlo in her parents' house on the outskirts of Mexico City, 1907. At the age of 18, Frieda suffered massive injuries in a bus accident, which ended her medical aspirations. During her recuperation, Frieda began to paint with oils. Her paintings were self-exposing, feminine, and often deeply political, in vibrant colors influenced by the native Mexican folk art she loved. At 21, she fell in love and married the famous Mexican muralist Diego Rivera. Their marriage was stormy, but inspired some of her best works. 55 of her 137 paintings are emotional and shocking self-portraits. She was celebrated in the art world, but led a tormented life. As we look back and travel through history. Travels Through History is brought to you by Maple Leaf Foods. 1919. Maria Eva Duarte was born into a poor family in Buenos Aires and lived to become one of the most controversial figures in Argentinian history. In November 1943, Evita, as she was affectionately called, met Colonel Juan Peron, the Secretary of Labor in the military government. When Juan was imprisoned by his opposition, Evita staged a massive demonstration for his release. They were married days later. After Juan became president, Evita Peron launched a successful campaign for national women's suffrage. The people loved her so much, they nominated her as the vice presidential candidate. Unprecedented public grief followed Eva Peron's death from cancer on July 26, 1952. As we look back and travel through history. Travels Through History is brought to you by Maple Leaf Foods. 1783. In 1782, Joseph and Etienne Montgolfier of France discovered that hot air was lighter than cold air by making small silk balloons float. News of this experiment was heard by the Science Academy of France, who hosted a flying demonstration with Louis XVI in attendance. The brothers built a 900 cubic meter balloon and flew a duck, a sheep, and a chicken in a basket. On November 21, 1783, the first men to fly were Pilatre de Rossier and the Marquis de Landes, who ascended from the center of Paris to 500 feet above the city rooftops, eventually landing over 5 miles away. To ease the panic of the farmers, the noblemen offered the locals champagne to celebrate the first human flight, a tradition that's still carried on today. As we look back and travel through history. Travels Through History is brought to you by Maple Leaf Foods. 1925. In the roaring 20s and the dirty 30s, big money was made. Morals and manners changed, and industrialization was booming. The art, architecture, fashion, and decorating styles reflected this time with images of machines, streamlined automobiles and airplanes, and geometric shapes in shiny metallic surfaces. This was the Art Moderne era. Perhaps the perfect architectural treasure of this era is the Chrysler Building in New York City. Built in 1930, the exterior reflects the Chrysler automobile in very sleek, majestic lines. In retrospect, the Art Moderne era was coined Art Deco after the exposition held in Paris in 1925 to celebrate living in the modern world. As we look back and travel through history. Travels Through History is brought to you by Maple Leaf Foods. 1600. The fiber has been around since Roman times, but grew to prominence in early 16th century France. It was the wife of Napoleon III who decided cashmere's eminence by calling it the fiber of kings. Cashmere derives its name from Kashmiri goats that roam the mountainous landscapes of Central Asia. Traditionally, the coarse and fine hairs were separated by hand, mostly in China, but at the end of the 19th century, machine separation was developed in Great Britain. The hair of nearly 4 goats, or 1.5 kilometers of yarn, is needed to produce one soft cashmere scarf, hence its quality and expense. The finest cashmere garments are still made in Scotland by generations of skilled yarn spinners, and desired by all of the top fashion houses in the world. As we look back and travel through history. Travels Through History is brought to you by Maple Leaf Foods. 1950. The term pop art was first used in London, England in 1950, referring to artists fascinated with mass media images from advertising, comics, consumer products, and celebrities. British artist Richard Hamilton and American artists Jasper Johns and Robert Rauschenberg began to broaden art away from academic forms and use familiar images from music and youth culture. This became part of the swinging London aesthetic. American Andy Warhol, a successful illustrator, became perhaps the most famous pop artist after exhibiting 32 Campbell's soup cans in 1962. Warhol's work commented on art itself and a media-obsessed public, where information is received at second or third hand through print or TV. As we look back and travel through history. Travels Through History is brought to you by Maple Leaf Foods. 1929. Her diary is likely the most famous ever written. She was born Anneliese Marie Frank on June 12, 1929. When Hitler gained power in 1933, the Frank family of Jewish descent emigrated to Amsterdam. Almost a decade later, the Nazis occupied Holland and began issuing deportation notices. Otto Frank had prepared 2 apartments in a hidden portion of his warehouse where the Franks remained secret for 25 months. The notes Anne wrote in a small diary tell her courageous tale of survival. Sadly, on August 8, 1944, the Frank family was captured, and in March 1945, Anne and her sister died in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp just weeks before it was liberated. As we look back and travel through history. Travels Through History is brought to you by Maple Leaf Foods. 1880. It was an extraordinary time when art and industry transformed to begin the first urban lifestyle, Art Nouveau. From 1880 to 1914, artists and craftsmen broke away from classical styles, bringing art to every day. Utilitarian objects and nature, once overlooked, now became inspirations for paintings, architecture, furniture, jewelry, and design. Some artisans continued to embrace decorative styles of old, colliding with modern materials, creating a true crossover art movement. The Czech artist Alphonse Mucha became one of the first graphic designers, using elaborate organic lines for champagne and theater posters. Gustav Klimt led Art Nouveau in Austria called Secession, creating ornamental paintings using stunning silver and gold and pushing the movement into a new century of art. As we look back and travel through history. Travels Through History is brought to you by Maple Leaf Foods. 1974. She is Japan's answer to Mickey Mouse. Since her birth 25 years ago, she has charmed millions, becoming the pinnacle of Japanese kawaii culture. She is Hello Kitty. She was first drawn in 1974, but she had no name. She was just a kitten with a little red bow and wide-set eyes, but her adorable character turned Hello Kitty into a celebrity. As her market expanded to women in their 20s and 30s, Hello Kitty's merchandising exploded from trinkets like wallets, stickers, and erasers to handbags, mobile phones, and even cars. This simple cartoon kitten is now plastered onto 22,000 different products and sold in 40 countries, making Hello Kitty a multi-billion-dollar sensation as we look back and travel through history. Travels Through History is brought to you by Maple Leaf Foods. 1947. She is one of the strongest women in U.S. history, a mother, a lawyer, an author, a first lady, and a senator. She was born Hillary Rodham on October 26, 1947, the first child of Hugh and Dorothy in Park Ridge, Illinois. In 1969, she attended Yale, where she met Bill Clinton. The couple became inseparable partners in court, politics, and matters of the heart, marrying in 1975. During her family's term in the White House, Hillary balanced her roles as a wife and mother in the public eye with grace. She was elected Senator of New York on November 7, 2000. She is the First Lady elected to the United States Senate and the first woman elected in New York. As we look back and travel through history. Travels Through History is brought to you by Maple Leaf Foods. 1951. They feature stories of betrayal and espionage. They titillate with steamy candlelit nights and fatal attractions. The term soap opera stems from the 1920s melodramatic radio serials housewives listened to during their afternoon chores. The commercials aimed at women were generally for cleaning supplies and detergent. Soap operas hooked the viewer in with relatable life events like birth, marriage, and death. The 1981 wedding of General Hospital's beloved characters Luke and Laura gained the highest daytime ratings ever. Avid viewers keep up with storylines through a myriad of magazines and websites devoted to their favorite soap. Today's soap operas are rivaled by reality television, like MTV's The Real World, where the characters actually pick bitter fights and fall madly in love. As we look back and travel through history. Travels Through History is brought to you by Maple Leaf Foods. 1987. The advent of genetic engineering completely changed the way humans think about their inner workings and opened up numerous possibilities in the medical field. In 1987, Helen Ryboff Whiteley, a University of Washington microbiology professor, first cloned the insecticide gene commonly found in soil. Since then, the production of genetically modified organisms has only increased, creating the potential to grow stronger, more efficient crops. But while there seems to be agricultural benefits for developing countries, GMOs are very controversial. Organizations like the Earth Liberation Front and Greenpeace are calling for a complete ban on GMOs, as playing God with genetics is unethical and unsafe. As we look back and travel through history. Travels Through History is brought to you by Maple Leaf Foods. 5000 BC. Chinese, Jewish, lunar, Islamic. There are so many different calendars plotting histories and futures. They all have one thing in common: the stars. Thousands of years ago, during the creation of ancient civilizations, celestial bodies such as the sun, moon, planets, and stars gave man a point of reference to measure time. Sun clocks in ancient Egypt were great obelisks whose shadows followed the sun's position, dividing days into hours. Water clocks of East Asia were the first timekeepers not dependent on the stars. In the 14th century, massive mechanical clocks began to appear in towers of great Italian cities. Keeping time has become a human obsession, with clocks on our wrists, in our pockets, and on cell phones keeping us all in time. As we look back and travel through history. Travels Through History is brought to you by Maple Leaf Foods. 1966. The Summer of Love, Woodstock, Vietnam, LSD. This was the backdrop of the Psychedelic Era. In the 1950s and 60s, government drug programs were testing versions of LSD. This led to widespread use among the hippie culture, dawning on the San Francisco scene. Mind-expanding psychedelic experiences painted a strong influence on music, fashion, and art. However, negative reviews of hallucinogens emerged, and alarmist reactions from the medical and legal authorities led to the ban of LSD by October 1966. The psychedelic aesthetics have faded away, despite the fact that LSD continues to be distributed illegally, turning people onto mind-manifesting journeys. As we look back and travel through history. Travels Through History is brought to you by Maple Leaf Foods. 1860. In the dark ages of nursing from the 1500s to the 1800s, nurses were considered the lowest level of human society. Nurses were generally drunks, illiterates, or prostitutes. Hospital conditions were horrific. Modern nursing dawned at the beginning of the 18th century, most notably with Florence Nightingale. Nightingale began administering to the wounded British soldiers during the Crimean War. She reformed nursing, putting emphasis on proper nutrition and sanitation. Nurses Week is celebrated on her birthday, May 12th. In America, Clara Barton provided advanced care on the battlefields of the Civil War. She established a service of supplies for soldiers and eventually founded the American Red Cross. These courageous women identified the importance of nursing, which has quickly advanced, becoming a dignified career in today's society. As we look back and travel through history.